Hey guys, welcome to Living It Up, and today we are here to answer the one question which is on everyone's mind. Which one to go for? The all-new KTM 390 Adventure or the Himalayan 450? The answer to your question essentially depends on how tall you are, yes that's right, and also what is your main intention behind this purchase. So to get straight to the point, if you're 5'10" and taller and your main intent behind this purchase is touring, then the Himalayan 450 makes a lot more sense because more than anything else, it has a much more comfortable rider's triangle for taller riders. The seat on the Himalayan is switchable. You have the lower seat option, which is 825, or the higher seat option, which is 845. I personally, with my 511 frame, found the 845mm seat height to be much better in terms of ergonomics, rider's triangle. My knees were not as cramped, and yeah, there was just a lot of space to move around. So that I found to be much more comfortable, especially compared to the new 390 Adventure with the lower 830mm seat. I found it to be really cramped and not very comfortable at all. Also, the seats on the Himalayan are a lot more comfortable, well padded, designed for the longer haul, both for the rider as well as the pillion. Then you have, of course, the suspension, which is arguably one of the best non-adjustable suspensions on any adventure motorcycle that we have ridden. You only get preload adjustability, but honestly, it has given us very few reasons to complain whether we are riding off-road or whether you're riding on the road or even with a pillion. Suspension works really well. The windscreen on both these motorcycles aren't really the best, but I kind of prefer, if I have to choose, the one on the Himalayan because it might not provide a whole lot of coverage because it's quite small, but at least it doesn't cause as much buffeting as the one on the 390 Adventure does. Then you also have a bigger 17-litre tank, good enough for a 350-kilometer range compared to the smaller 14.5-litre tank on the KTM 390 Adventure. And of course, you have the new Sherpa 450 engine, which has impressed us a lot and which is surprisingly also less buzzy compared to the one on the new 390 Adventure. But you have to note that you have to make peace by riding or increasing your cruising speed from 100 to 120, where the engine settles down a little bit, with the vibe settle down a little bit, especially when you're riding in the 5th and 6th gear. And while in this scenario, the Himalayan 450 checks all the right boxes, it is also worth mentioning that you have to sign up and deal with the cone set issue, which still continues to exist as it did on the previous iteration, as well as this iteration of the motorcycle, and I have no idea why Royal Enfield have not been able to get around that problem yet, which can get a little bit annoying. So you have been warned. Now, if you're 5'9" and shorter, I think the KTM 390 Adventure starts making a whole lot more sense for you because the rider's triangle will actually be perfect for your frame. You'll not feel it as cramped as the taller riders do. Also, because you're sitting a little bit lower, the buffeting won't be as bad. In terms of safety, the 390 Adventure is hands down a lot more safer option compared to the Himalayan 450 because of its extensive suite of electronic aids. You have cornering ABS, you have cornering traction control, you get a bidirectional quick shifter, you also get a cruise control, which will come really handy when you're going touring. Also, the headlight on the 390 Adventure, I found it to be much better in terms of both intensity as well as the coverage compared to the unit on the Himalayan. So especially if you're touring for long days and you happen to reach the destination in the night, you will be covered, especially with the headlight of the KTM. And now that the new 390 Adventure comes with the same amount of travel and ground clearance as the Himalayan, and the fact that you get adjustability, good ride quality is a given. So from that front, in terms of comfort, you're absolutely sorted. But having said that, if you're riding with a pillion, I still think the Himalayan has an edge here because it has a much flatter and wider seat compared to the one on the 390 Adventure. Now, if you're in the market for an everyday motorcycle which can also double up as a tourer, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, here again, the KTM 390 Adventure makes a better argument because it does the small things right. By that I mean you have the light clutch, you have the shorter gearing and the crawl feature now, which makes the engine on the KTM 390 so much easier to live with, especially in traffic situations, because you have better low-end grunt, you have better tractability. Yeah, it just makes your life so much simpler, which has always been a problem with the Himalayan 450, with it having to be revved up quite a lot and the clutch being quite hard. And yes, being the more high-strung motor of the two, the KTM does heat up more than the Himalayan, but surprisingly, it also cools off very, very quickly as soon as you start moving. So we did encounter some heating issues on the first ride, but that was not really the problem on the second bike that we have had and which we have been riding around in the city. So the heat management on the new KTM, if this is how it's supposed to be, seemed to be pretty good. But the biggest advantage that the 390 Adventure has over the Himalayan 450 is the fact that it's 14 kgs lighter, has a shorter wheelbase and is a much more mass centralized motorcycle, which makes it very easy to ride, very unintimidating even for new riders, whether you're in the parking lot, when you're riding around in traffic, or even when you go off-road. Before the new 390 Adventure had arrived, the Himalayan was undoubtedly the king of off-road. It had more travel, it had more ground clearance, it had superior Showa suspension, it also had a 21-inch front, and now you also had 21/17 tubeless spoke wheels, which are a godsend, especially if you want to go riding in the trail. But with the new 390 Adventure, that advantage no longer exists because it gets the same suspension travel now. In fact, even more ground clearance, and more importantly, it gets adjustability, and it is a whole lot lighter. And what that means is, for any person new to off-road, when they get on the KTM, they find it very unintimidating to ride because of the mass centralization. It doesn't feel as top heavy. And what the adjustability does is that just with a few clicks, you can set up the KTM for whatever it is that you want to do with the motorcycle, at what pace you want to run, and what terrain that you want to run. Because just by dialing down the damping, the KTM really makes light work of the most technical rocky surfaces that you will find here. It just glides over it. And then when you want to attack fast trails, you just have to dial up the damping and you are set, and the motorcycle handles beautifully. And as good as the suspension is on the Himalayan, it doesn't have this level of adjustability. It doesn't give you this much leverage to really tweak the suspension to the surface, to what it is that you want to do with it. And that's a big, big advantage. Yes, we did find the limits of the 390 Adventure on some really fast trails where we are bottoming out the suspension. And I was a little bit disappointed because I was expecting a little bit more. But I have to remind myself that we were going significantly faster than the Himalayan on the same exact trail. So there is no question that the 390 Adventure is a much sharper weapon off-road compared to the Himalayan. It's also a lot less physically demanding. And lastly, with the 390 Adventure, especially on technical terrain, rocky terrain, the Trampler tires, which surprised us a lot, both on-road and off-road, with the amount of grip that they offered, the light clutch that the 390 has, and the crawl mode were a godsend, because that's one thing which the Himalayan really struggled with, especially in a new engine, because it needed a lot of revs. So a lot of people were not quite happy with how much they have to rev it and how it had lost the tractability, especially compared to the 411. The 390 Adventure, even though it's a revvy engine, these things make it a lot easier to ride on the most technical of terrain. But then again, just like the cone set issue on the Himalayan, what you need to bear in mind with the new 390 Adventure is that it still has some teething issues. My quick shifter, which works so flawlessly on the first ride motorcycle in Goa, was not working at all on the motorcycle which we had here for the longer test run. Secondly, the heating issue did not show up here, but then the engine light again came on when we were riding fast in the trail, and it stayed on for a long time. It only went away the next day. It very well again could be a software glitch, but these still exist. And the same Can also be said about the side stand issue, which a lot of my friends have experienced, where it essentially just prevents your motorcycle from starting out because there's some problem with the side stand sensor. So yeah, there are still a lot of teething issues on the 390 Adventure, just as the cone set issue and the mechanical clatter on the Himalayan. Now that we have all the cards on the table, to summarize, I would personally go for the Himalayan if my main intention is touring, because it suits my 511 frame much better and will do the same for you, especially if you're taller. But if you're looking for a daily rider and a really capable off-roader, then I think the KTM 390 Adventure is undoubtedly the weapon of choice for you guys. Even though it is a little more expensive, for the extra money that you're paying, you're also getting a whole lot of electronic aids, which definitely make it the more safer motorcycle of the two.